Welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum, and here we are at episode 39 of the Student Ministry Podcast. We're so grateful that you're here. Whether this is your first time or you've been tuning in for all 38 episodes before that, we're so grateful that you keep coming back and listening to the podcast every month. If you have not subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. That would be awesome. And if you know others in student ministry, whether they be youth pastors, full-time youth pastors, or whether they be volunteers or small group leaders or just parents or other leaders who just occasionally help out, if they have any sort of connection with student ministry, be sure to share these stories with others. And that's what we really want to focus on is stories. As you guys have probably been able to tell over the last 38 episodes, I love talking with other youth pastors and other youth workers about their stories. How did God get them into their ministry? And we have another one here today with Austin Williams. Austin is the student pastor at a church in Villa Rica, Georgia. He's going to tell you all about it in just a bit, and also about his new podcast that he started. And you can hear, like I said, all about that in just a bit when we dive into that interview. Austin's been, it was a great interview just because I got to hear a little bit about his heart behind ministry and some of the struggles that he had early on and how God just blessed that when he handed everything over to God and said, okay, God, it's about what you want for this ministry and not about what I want. It's not about my name or anything like that. He handed it over in this humble attitude, and God has just been blessing it, and it's been awesome to hear about what God has done at his in his ministry. But before we jump into that interview, we do want to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors are awesome because they keep giving to make this podcast happen every month. And so first, we want to thank WorkCamp NE. You've heard me talk about this. If you're not new to the podcast, you've heard me over and over talk about WorkCamp NE. They've been a longtime sponsor, but also a longtime partner. If you're looking for an opportunity for your students to go and serve, but kind of beyond the regular mission trip. Mission trips are awesome and mission trips are great, and I highly recommend them for your ministry. But if you're looking for something that goes a few steps beyond the traditional mission trip, WorkCamp NE is one of those opportunities for you. You can check out their website at workcampne.com, and they have several trips that are already planned that youth groups from around the world come together to serve, but also they do private trips if you're looking for something different. So make sure you do contact them and tell them that the Student Ministry Podcast sent you. We also want to thank our other sponsor of the National Network of Youth Ministries. Their website is youthworkers.net, and they are all about connecting youth workers together. So often we try to do ministry on our own, and we're in our own little silo, our own little world, trying to figure it out on our own, and it's time to stop that, guys. It's time to stop that solo sort of attitude. We need to actually lean upon each other. In fact, the stat out there, it says that youth pastors will actually stay in a church for anywhere between 18 months to 2 years, but actually that stat doubles when they're in a network, an active network where they have support and prayer and encouragement from other youth workers around them. So if you've been looking for a network around you, check out youthworkers.net to see what opportunities are already there for you to get plugged in your own community. And if there isn't one, be sure to start one. There's a lot of different resources on there that you can check out to start your own network. Again, we thank WorkCamp NE and the National Network of Youth Ministries for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. And with all that being said, let's dive into this interview with Austin Williams. Hey, Austin, how's it going?
Great, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you today, too. And for some of you that maybe are not familiar with Austin, could you go ahead and just start off with telling us a little bit about your story, maybe how you came into a relationship with Christ, and also how you got into ministry in the first place?
So I'm the high school pastor at First Baptist Villa Rica, and I've been here a little over 5 years. And I guess, kind of long story short, I kind of grew up in ministry. My dad was a youth pastor. I think he started when he was 26 and moved us into a trailer park when I was like 5. And he started going to school and to become a youth pastor. So basically, I grew up around it. I was like that PK that was like at every youth event that everyone was annoyed by, I think. Because, they'd be like, why is this fourth grader at 12th grade camp? You know what I'm saying? So So that's kind of what I was always surrounded by. And then I kind of had my stage of where I was also the other kind of classic PK, where I was the troublemaker in school. And I say that in jest. I don't really think I got in trouble, but I did a lot of dumb things, and partied and all that stuff. And I didn't really have a plan for after high school. And anyway, I moved to a different high school in the middle of my high school career. I think it was in 11th grade. I moved in 9th and 10th grade, I went to a really big school here in the West Georgia area. And when we moved, I moved to a tiny school where basically we had new kids every day at my first high school that it just was a thing. At my new high school, I was the new kid. You know what I'm saying? So totally different dynamic. I hated every second of it my first year, only because I was just so used to just kind of being lost in a crowd of people. And then so I had to really, the first 2 months of this new high school in 11th grade, I would eat lunch in my car because I walked into the cafeteria during lunch on my first day, and it was almost like a movie. Everyone just got quiet and looked at me, and I was like, nope. And I turned around and I walked out, and because I would say I'm an extrovert, but all of a sudden I was like, nope, I'm the most introverted kid I've ever known. And, sat in my car, and then one day I remember talking to my dad, and I was like, this just isn't my thing. It's a small school. It's a different kind of vibe here. And he was he just challenged me. He said, look, I would just do, sit at a different lunch table every day or find a way to make friends. And so one day I did. I started sitting with a different table every day and made friends with a lot of kids that I never would have been friends with at my first school. And I think that was kind of the driving force for ministry. By senior year, I had a lot of friends at this school, and some of them were going into ministry, and they kept saying, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know, military? I don't know. And one day I remember sitting in my room, and I felt called. I don't really know how to explain it. I know a lot of guys have a different perspective. I just kind of felt it, whatever that is. I just remember praying, and I was like, I think I'm feel called to ministry. So long story medium, I went to a college in North Carolina. It's called Fruitland Bible College, and went there for 2 years, worked at a church called Mud Creek for 2 years. And when I graduated with an associate's, and First Baptist Villa Rica was in need of a youth pastor. And so back in my kind of hometown, so I moved back to Georgia, and been here ever since. Wow. So been here for 5 years, and I'm loving every second of it. Met my wife here. We've been married for 3 years, and it's been really crazy, man. It's been a blast. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I think maybe you're one of the first people that I talked to on this podcast that is actually a son of a youth pastor. A lot of times we do have PKs and everything, but usually it's of a preacher or something. And so this is cool to see kind of the bloodline, if you will, within youth ministry.
Yeah. It's in the blood now. We are interlinked. Nice.
Is your father still in youth ministry, or?
So no, crazy. When I said I wanted to go into ministry, we kind of had this kind of funny conversation, hey, what if one day we did ministry together? Which it happens, but doesn't really happen, I think, in a lot of places. And if it does, sometimes it ends up being a disaster. But he's actually the senior pastor here now. And yeah, and it and I can get into all that later. But yeah, he's the senior pastor of the first church he's ever been the senior pastor of, and it has been a crazy, awesome 5 years.
I'm sure. Wow. That's really cool. Yeah. My calling to youth ministry kind of happened in high school as well. I did not have any family members within, my immediate family that were in ministry, but I kind of got it modeled for me through, especially my grandfather, who was a big volunteer within the church and kind of just stood out to me. But yeah, I can kind of identify a little bit with that calling. It just kind of happened. I mean, I identify some things that kind of pointed to that. But yeah, it was just kind of what one day you're like, you know what? I think this is the path that God wants me to go on. And that's really cool.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
That's awesome. So let's talk about your ministry a little bit. So you are the student pastor at your church. What does that look like? What's your responsibilities look like? And what kind of ministry? Unpack the ministry a little bit.
So we came here. I'm going to be super real right now. I had zero expectations. I came in, I think a lot of young, so when I came here to be the youth pastor, I was 21 and, I think I was just about turned 22. And, so I think the expectation for the church was hey, we hired a young guy to run the youth, you know what I'm saying? And I felt that. And so, that was kind of my vibe too, was I'll just be the young guy that tries to relate, to the teenagers. Well, that I just was. Yeah. So, zero expectations, but I did have this kind of I don't think this is I don't think this is true for everybody. So I'm not generalizing to anyone listening, but I think a lot of younger youth pastors come in with this kind of hot shot mentality. And I had that for sure. And I remember that Wednesday night, it was our first Wednesday. I guess I didn't really pay attention to the room, but they kind of did worship the way they'd always done it. My kind of goal was just see what they do, and then I would preach and kind of give a vision. And I had all my notes on this cool little iPad mini, and I wore my dopest flannel button down, unbuttoned halfway, and in my best skinny pants, and got on I remember I still dress that way today, so I don't know why I'm making fun of who I am now. But anyway, I got up on the stage, and I turned around, and man, there were 8. I had 8 students. 8. I count them to this day, and 3 of them are still in the youth right now. They're 11th graders. They were 6th graders at the time. 8 students all spread out, and I had 2 leaders that were sitting in the very back, just kind of smiling, good luck. And man, if you saw this town, Villa Rica, where I'm at now. So I grew up in Douglasville, which is right next to Villa Rica. Douglasville is a huge community, and Villa Rica would be considered a medium to small size town. So it's kind of rural. So it was kind of that hit me right when I stood on stage. I was like, wait, where am I? And I saw them all, and I remember I put my notes down, and I just looked at them, and it was like God was like, you need to be real. Stop trying to be this trendy Austin, just be real. And man, I looked at him, I was like, look, all 8 of you. I said, this is either going to be the best thing ever, or we're just going to be another youth group lost in the wind of small youth groups that, we just do things the way we do them, and we can try and be different, but everyone's different, so we're all the same. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, let's make this thing what we know God can make it be. And I don't know if our pastor coined this phrase. So, if you're listening and your pastor actually says this, then hey, we're the same. But our pastor always says, dream a dream so big that if it comes true, only God could do it. And so I remember thinking that. And I was like, guys, listen, we can either make this awesome or it can just be what it is. And I said, so I'm going to challenge this youth ministry. I want us to double in size by next week. Now, that didn't mean anything to 8 kids, all right, let's double 8 and let's see what happens. But man, the next week we had 17 and we doubled it and then won. And that changed my whole mindset. A little while later, I remember sitting outside by the youth area before we started, and we had I think we had about 20 that night. They were kind of running around. We were getting ready to start worship. And I was sitting with my new worship leader. We were talking, and he looked at me. He came from where we grew up, so we've always known each other. And he looked at me. He was like, dude, what are we doing here? And I was like, dude, I don't know, but I hope God has a big plan. And long story short, about 3 years later, we hit 200 on a Wednesday night. Wow. And God was doing some big things. And we were in a basement with some trailers, and now we have this brand new, just opened up last April, so it's about to be a year old, new youth facility with a gym and a middle school worship space, a high school worship space, and our connect groups are going great on Sunday mornings. Wednesday nights are booming. And it's just all because of what God's doing in this ministry. And it's been really cool to see. And like that, and that's what I was saying earlier. These past 5 years have been crazy to see what God's doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just to be a part of something where God's clearly moving, and just to be along for that ride. That must be awesome.
Yeah, man, it's insane.
It's really cool. So what's what does your programming structure look like there? And I'm assuming it's probably changed a little bit over the years and stuff. But how did you kind of fall into what you guys are doing, and what does that look like right now?
So essentially, what we kind of started doing, to really make it as it's very spiritual, obviously, but to make it really practical as well. A lot of what we did was I wanted the students to kind of own the worship experience and own Sunday mornings, not just like come to a program at a church. So I kind of sat down with some of who I kind of identified as key leadership students and told them exactly what I wanted to see, and that it was going to be up to them to make it happen. And we would pray together, start a little vision team with some leaders. Every year we started kind of a new, I guess you'd call it vision, where I'd called, I think my third year here, I called it the year of the leader. And basically I dedicated that whole year to growing our leadership, college and adult leaders. And so we just went full on recruiting and doubled our leadership that year. I think we have about 35 leaders that are real strong, real solid. They're going to be there at every event. And that was cool to see. So really honing in on our adult leaders was a big thing, because they're just going to be extensions of of the vision I cast. So I would say that's one big thing. The advice I give to every student pastor that I talk to is really hone in on your leaders, and don't make it to where you're just trying to get them to recruit them, form relationships with them. That's a big key to it. And so when we started getting them involved, it helped with the students. They started taking it seriously because the leaders were taking it seriously. And I think about 3 or 4 years later, we started this cool thing that anyone can use. We started doing this thing called Campus Reps.
Okay.
Cool little program we started where we identify key students, middle school and high school. And if I'm we write our own stuff as far as like a series that we do. So if I develop a series, if I write out a series, then I got a guy that makes graphics. And so he'll make the graphics. We'll all look at it together. I'll approve it. And then we'll send out like these cool little videos, cool graphics, and all this stuff, call it like a Dropbox and or a care package. Okay. And these students, their one job is to represent us at their campus. So campus rep. So they their whole job that week or that Wednesday is to promote, wear the T-shirts, wear the hats, the bracelets, put out the posters, anything that they could possibly do. And then when they come on a Wednesday, we have worship. We have a nice little worship team that helps with that. And it's like every Wednesday night is like a Super Bowl to us. So we take it very seriously. And they come in and it's like very dynamic worship. A lot of times I'll preach or I'll have a guest, but I'm sort of the lead communicator. And then so I'll preach one of the series we're doing, make it very intentional. And then at the end, we have our new gym. So they'll hang out in the gym for about an hour and then go home. And then Sundays are very, kind of what you'd expect. They come, we do some worship together in the high school area, and then they break off into connect groups, and then we make the main service a thing. So that's just kind of what we do throughout that's kind of our weekday program is a lot of being in the schools and promoting from within the schools, because that's where they're at. We take social media very, very seriously here. It's a big tool for us. So yeah, and then you have your big events, summer camp, DNOW, all that kind of stuff.
That's really cool. I love that that you kind of identify those students to. I think it's sometimes, at least I found, we like to encourage our students to really do something in the school and reach out to their friends, but I wonder how often we really equip them, like it seems like you guys really have, and said, here's the tools to actually to go and do that, and here we're counting on you, and empower them to actually go out and do it, and you're going to try to equip them and train them and do everything that they need to actually succeed in that.
Yeah,
that's really, really cool. One of the things that kind of stands out to me, it seems that you kind of have a parallel situation from your childhood, at least in your high school time, coming from that bigger school to a small school situation, going through that personally, and then all of a sudden stepping into that in your ministry. Has that ever kind of stood out to you, kind of the parallel stories there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because it has been something, it took me a while to realize that, but I truly believe God was preparing me for where I am. And that's been a big thing, because I was very much, like I said, I'm very open about it. I came in thinking I was this hot shot, and it was like He humbled me in both places. And so you allow Him to take over, and then you can see what happens.
Yeah.
So,
man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So on top of your ministry, I know you also have a podcast. How's that going, and what's that all about?
Yeah. Yeah. So we just started it. It's been in the works for, 9 months. The goal was to start it like a year ago, and it just wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to. But now it's ready. It's called Your Story Matters. I'm a big perspectives guy. I like to learn the perspectives of other people. Whether I agree with them or disagree with them, I want to know why they come from where they come from. So we're going to have some cool guys on. Actually, when I get off of this podcast, right after, I'm actually interviewing Ben Trueblood from Lifeway. He's the head of student ministries there. And so basically, it's just a really chill kind of thing. People from all walks of life share their story, how they got to where they got to, redemption stories, and then I also want to share the stories of extraordinary positions where, like, for example, I have a trucker who's going to be on in a couple of weeks. What is that like? Just random. I don't know. It's interesting to me. Hopefully it'll be interesting to other people. But yeah, man, it's 2 episodes are coming out this week.
Cool.
So
cool. Well, before we wrap up, we do want to just ask you for some tips. Maybe you've shared a lot of wisdom already in the short time we've been talking, but if you were, a lot of times I love to ask this question kind of couched in the idea of, if you were to go back in time and tell your younger self, here's some tips that would have helped you earlier on. Now that you know what you know now, what are some tips and tricks that you would share with other youth pastors out there?
Man, my younger self. A lot of it is it's going to sound so weird, but it helped me. But don't take it too seriously, but also take it very seriously. I think a lot of people come in with this mentality, like, I'm going to be the next Billy Graham of this youth group, and I mean, that's cool to have that sort of like drive, but don't let the drive drive you, because if you get stuck in that, then when it doesn't happen, it's all about prioritizing. So if you prioritize the correct way. So what's the most important outcome in your student ministry? If that's your priority, then when you reach the goal, so, if your goal is baptizing students, or if your goal is, making your student ministry dynamic, not just like numerically, but spiritually, if that's your goal, then go get it. But I would say, have fun and align your vision with the church's vision. There's so many broken youth pastors, at least in our area, that don't have the same vision as their senior pastor or lead pastor. Yeah. And then what happens is they get bitter, and then people that feel bitter don't feel blessed, and then they feel broken. And then they, despise the church or don't want to be in student ministry anymore. And the turnover rate in youth pastors, at least in the South, I don't know about in Colorado, but over here it's about 2 years. Every 2 years we lose youth pastors. And I'm the director of the Student Pastor Network for all of West Georgia now. And I'm on my 2nd year. And I can tell you that I would say about 60% of the youth pastors that I had relationships with last year are gone. So it's tough. But I think it's just a lot of people that are just looking for a job in a church, and So I would say just take it seriously, but don't take it seriously. Don't come in thinking I'm going to be this guy. Come in thinking, how can God use me? I know that's real preachery and real churchy, but I believe it 100%.
That's so good. And I think it hits where I've seen this trend over the last, several years of being in a ministry. And I think, it happened probably when I was starting into ministry, that all of a sudden we started seeing youth pastors that actually did want to become youth pastors. It wasn't like a stepping stone within ministry and things like that, where
Sure.
people are starting to take that student ministry role more seriously. And this is what God has called me to do. But yeah, you also, I think with that, sometimes you cross that line and take it a little too seriously and start thinking like, I'm going to be the next, whatever name you want to fill in there, instead of just being who God has called you to be, where he's called you to be. And
and then you got a lot of these guys that just like that, but sometimes they get bitter because that age-old question. I mean, you're a student pastor. They'll come up and say, so when are you going to be a real pastor, right. Steve? When's that going to happen? And you're like, I thought I was, and some people handle that differently.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I love the fact that like what you talked about being in line. I think that's huge to be able to see your ministry as a part of the whole is huge. I think because I've been there where I've towed the line of bitterness, and it's not a fun place to be at all. And all of a sudden you start seeing competition within your own church and all these different things. And like, that's not what it's all about at all.
Sure. Yeah. And then you come in and a lot of it's, you come in and that honeymoon phase ends after 2 years. Well, they weren't prepared for it. So as soon as they get pushback, they're out. So,
right.
Yeah.
Man, Austin, it's been great to talk to you today. I'm sure that people are going to want to connect with you more online. They're going to want to check out your podcasts. I'd love to have you share some ideas of where some people can find you online.
Yeah, if you can follow me on Twitter. I post a lot of my updates on like our ministry and our podcast there. It's at Austin C. Williams. Very easy. And then Instagram's at Austin Williams C. So you can just check everything out on there, or you can look at our podcast at YSM Podcast, and then our student ministries at First View Our Students. So you can, if y'all ever want to check it out, see what we're doing, maybe it helps you. Maybe it's something that you will learn what not to do. Who knows? But I'm just here to help either way.
Cool. Well, Austin, again, it's been awesome to talk to you today, and may God bless your ministry.
Thanks, Steve. I'm about to add you on Facebook, so don't be freaked out.
Sounds great. One of my favorite quotes from Austin in this episode was this. He said that people who are bitter don't feel blessed. And I hope you feel blessed. I hope you're not bitter in your ministry. But maybe there was another quote that stood out to you, something that Austin said that really resonated with you. Be sure to share that on social media. Let us know. Tag us as well. If you're not following us on social media, be sure to do so. We're at StewMenPod on Twitter. We're at The Student Ministry Podcast, both on Facebook and Instagram. And we'd love for you to follow us. You can also follow me if you want on all those different platforms at Steve Cullum, and be sure to follow Austin and his podcast and everything he does in ministry. We do want to thank our sponsors one more time, WorkCamp NE, for all your mission trip needs for student ministry. That's workcampne.com, and the National Network of Youth Ministries. Their website is youthworkers.net. Be sure to get connected with other youth workers in your area. Again, we've come to the end of another podcast. I mean, it's flown by, right? I know that many of you are wanting to go on. You want to hear more stories, but if you're new, we have 38 other episodes for you to check out before this one. So make sure you do look back in our archives and listen to those and share them with other youth workers that you know that need to hear these stories of encouragement, of wisdom, and just hearing what God is doing around the world in youth ministry. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Student Ministry Podcast. Again, my name's Steve Cullum, and we thank you so much, and may God bless your ministry.